and thank you for joining me again this week for the reading of the Bible for chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8. Chapter 5. A man with an unclean spirit. And they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, and as soon as he stepped out of the boat, there met from the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could any longer bind him, even with chains, for often he had been bound with fetters and chains, and he had rent the chains asunder, and broken the fetters into pieces. And no one was able to control him, and constantly, night and day, he was in the tombs and on the mountains, howling and gashing himself with stones. He worships Jesus. Oh, let's see, chapter 5, verse 2. The dead were commonly buried in rock tombs outside the town. The outcasts of society, such as lepers and demonics, frequently sought shelter in them. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have I to do with thee, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Go out of the man, thou unclean." For he was saying to him, "Go out of the man, thou unclean spirit." Jesus asked his name, and he said to him, "What is thy name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he entreated him earnestly not to drive him out of the country. The unclean spirits enter the swine. Now a great herd of swine was there on the mountainside, feeding. And the spirits kept entreating him, saying, "Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them." And Jesus immediately gave them leave. And the unclean spirits came out and entered into the swine and the herd, in number about 2,000, I apologize, rushed down with great violence into the sea and were drowned in the sea. Jesus asked to leave, but the swineherds fled and reported it in the town and the country, and people came out to see what had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the man who had been afflicted by the devil, sitting clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it reported to them how it had happened, to the possessed man and about the swine. And they began to entreat him to depart from their district. Jesus departs, and as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been afflicted by the devil began to entreat him that he might remain with him. And he did not allow him, but said to him, "Go home to thy relatives and tell them that all that the Lord has done for thee, and how he has had mercy on thee." And he departed and began to publish in the Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. Jairus asked Jesus to cure his daughter. When Jesus had again crossed over in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered together to him, and he was at the water's edge. And there came one of the rulers of the synagogue named Jairus. And seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and entreated him much, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Come, lay thy hands upon her, that she may be saved and live." The woman with a hemorrhage. And he went away with him, and a great crowd was following him and pressing upon him. And there was a woman who for 12 years had had a hemorrhage, and had suffered much at the hands of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and found no benefit, but rather grew worse. Hearing about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I touch but his cloak, I shall be saved." And at once the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus cures her. And Jesus, instantly perceiving in himself that power had gone forth from him, turned to the crowd and said, "Who touched my cloak?" And his disciples said to him, "Thou seest the crowd pressing upon thee, and dost thou say, 'Who touched me?'" And he was looking around to see her who had done this. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened within her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. But he said to her, "Daughter, thy faith has saved thee. Go in peace, and be thou healed of thy affliction." Jairus' daughter dies. While he was yet speaking, there came some from the house of the ruler of the synagogue, saying, "Thy daughter is dead. Why dost thou trouble the master further?" But Jesus, having heard what was being said, said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only have faith." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. Jesus restores her life. And they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and he saw a tumult, people weeping and wailing greatly. And going in, he said to them, "Why do you make this din and weep? The girl is asleep, not dead." And they laughed him to scorn. But he, putting them all out, took the father and mother of the girl, and those who were with him, and entered in where the girl was lying. Taking the girl by the hand, he said to her, Talitha Kumi, which is interpreted, Girl, I say to thee, arise. And the girl rose up immediately and began to walk. She was 12 years old, and they were utterly amazed. And he charged them strictly that no one should know of it, and directed that something should be given her to eat. Chapter 6. Jesus of Nazareth. And leaving that place, he went into his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many, when they heard him, were astonished at his doctrine, saying, Where did he get all this? And what is this wisdom that's given to him? And what mean such miracles wrought by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Jude, and Simon? And are not also his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Chapter 6, verse 3. The term sister, like brother, was used in a wide sense. 331. The son of Mary designates the only son of a widow. And Jesus said to them, A prophet is not without honor except in his own country, and among his own kindred, and in his own house. And he could not work any miracle there, beyond curing a few sick people by laying his hands upon them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. The mission of the apostles. And he made a circuit of the villages, teaching. And he summoned the 12, and began to send them forth, 2 by 2. And he gave them power over the unclean spirits. And he instructed them to take nothing for their journey but a staff only, no wallet, no bread, no money in their girdle. Verse 8. The apostles were to go forth without ordinary provisions, relying upon providence and the hospitality of their countrymen, but to wear sandals and not to put on 2 tunics. And he said to them, Wherever you enter into a house, stay there until you leave the place. And whoever does not receive you or listen to you, go forth from there, and shake off the dust from your feet for a witness against them. And going forth, they preached that men should repent, and they cast out many devils, and anointed with oil many sick people, and healed them. Herod hears of Christ. And King Herod heard of him, for his name had become well known, and he kept saying, John the Baptist has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are working through him. Jesus' activity had aroused intense speculation as to his identity. But others were saying, It is Elijah. But others were saying, It is a prophet, like one of the prophets. But when Herod heard this, he said, It is John, whom I beheaded. He has risen from the dead. John the Baptist, imprisoned by Herod. For Herod himself had sent and taken John and bound him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. For John had said to Herod, It is not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife. But Herodias laid snares for him, and would have liked to put him to death, but she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was just and holy man, and protected him. And when he heard him talk, he did many things, and he liked to hear him. John the Baptist beheaded by Herod. And a favorable day came upon when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet to the officials, tribunes, and chief men of Galilee. And Herodias' own daughter, having come in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, Ask of me what thou willest, and I will give it to thee. And he swore to her, Whatever thou dost ask, I will give thee, even though it be half of my kingdom. Then she went out and said to her mother, What am I to ask for? And she said, Pardon me. No, she actually said, The head of John the Baptist. And she came in at once with haste to the king, and asked, saying, I want thee right away to give me on a dish, the head of John the Baptist. And grieved as he was, the king, because of his oath and his guest, was unwilling to displease her. The Greek text probably means would not break faith with her. But sending an executioner, he commanded that his head be brought on a dish. Then he beheaded him in the prison, and brought his head on a dish, and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. His disciples, hearing of it, came and took away his body, and laid it in a tomb. Return of the disciples. And the apostles came together to meet Jesus, and reported to him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, Come apart into a desert place, and rest a while. For there were many coming and going. They had no leisure, even to eat. And they got into the boat, and went off to a desert place apart. And many saw them leaving, and recognized them. And from all the towns they hurried on foot to the place, and got there ahead of them. Jesus preaches to a large crowd. And when he landed, Jesus saw a large crowd, and had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach with them many things. Now when the day was far apart, his disciples came, saying, This is a desert place, and the hour is already late. Send them away so they may go to the hamlets and villages round about and buy themselves food to eat. He desires to feed them. But he answered and said to them, You yourselves give them some food. And they said to him, Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them to eat? Verse 33, recognize them. The words can also mean realized where they were going. Verse 34, many things. At some length is implied. And he said to them, How many loaves have you? Go and see. When they had found out, they said 5 and 2 fishes. Jesus feeds 5,000, and he ordered them to make all the people recline in groups on the green grass. And they reclined in groups of hundreds and of fifties. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And the 2 fishes he divided among them all. And all ate and were satisfied. And they gathered up what was left over, 12 baskets full of fragments, besides what was left over of the fishes. Now those who had eaten were 5,000 men. Jesus walks on the water, and immediately afterwards he made his disciples get into the boat and cross the sea ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he himself dismissed the crowd. And when he had dismissed them, he went away to the mountain to pray. And when it was late, the ship was in the midst of the sea, and he alone on the land. And seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them, about the 4th watch of the night he came to them, walking upon the sea, and he would have passed by them. But they, seeing him walking upon the sea, thought it was a ghost, and cried out, for they all saw him and were troubled. Then he immediately spoke to them, and said to them, Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid. And he got into the boat with them, and the wind fell, and they were utterly beside themselves with astonishment, for they had not understood about the loaves, because their heart was blinded. Other miracles. In crossing over, they came to the land at Gennesareth, and moored the boat. When they had gotten out of the boat, the people at once recognized him. They hurried through that whole country, and began to bring the sick on their pallets wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went into the village or hamlet or town, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and entreated him to let them touch but the tassel of his cloak, and as many as touched him were saved. Chapter 7. The Pharisees questioned Jesus, and the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered about him. When they saw that some of his disciples were eating bread with defiled, that is, unwashed hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat without frequent washing of hands, holding the traditions of the ancients. Verse 3. It was characteristic of the Pharisees to insist on the binding force of traditional interpretations of the law, which they termed the traditions of the ancients, even at the expense of the law itself. This resulted in frequent frustration of the law and laid unbearable burdens upon the law-abiding Jew. And when they came from the market, they do not eat without washing first. And there have been handed down to them many other things to observe, washing of cups and pots and brazen vessels and beds. So the Pharisees and scribes asked him, Why do not thy disciples walk according to the tradition of the ancients instead of eating bread with defiled hands? Jesus calls them hypocrites. But answering, he said to them, Well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And that is referencing Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13. And in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine the precepts of men. For letting go the commandment of God, you hold fast the tradition of men, the washing of pots and of cups, and many other things you do like to these. He accuses them of breaking God's law, and he said to them, Well do you nullify the commandment of God, that you may keep your own tradition. For Moses said, Honor thy father and thy mother, and let him who curses father or mother be put to death. And this is referencing in verse 10, Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, 21, verse 17, Leviticus chapter 20, verse 9, and Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16. But you say, let a man say to his father or his mother, Any support thou mightest have had from me is Corban, that is given to God. Corban, a gift to God which could be put to no other use. A son could evade giving support to his parents by declaring Corban what might have been given them. Jesus here illustrates how the Pharisees' teaching frustrated the law of Moses. And you do not allow him to do anything further for his father or mother. You make void the commandment of God by your tradition, which you have handed down, and many such like things you do. Jesus speaks to the crowd. Then he called the crowd to him again and said to them, Hear me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a man that entering into him can defile him, but the things that come out of a man, these are what defile a man. If anyone has ears, let him hear. Jesus explains the parable to his disciples. And when he had, excuse me, when he had entered the house away from the crowd, his disciples began to ask him about the parable. And he said to them, Are you also then without understanding? Do you not realize that nothing from outside by entering a man can defile him? For it does not enter into his heart, but his belly, and passes out into the drain. Then he declared all foods clean. The Mosaic law prohibited certain foods, and thereby declared them legally unclean. I believe I said this. He declared all foods clean. Okay, and he said, the things that come out of a man are what defile a man. For from within, out of the heart of man come evil thoughts. Men come evil thoughts. Adulteries, immorality, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, shamefulness, jealousy, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man. The Canaanite woman. And he arose and departed from there, from the district of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and wanted no one to know it. But he could not keep it secret, for immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit, on hearing of him, came in and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she besought him to cast the devil out of her daughter. But he said to her, Let the children first have their fill, for it is not fair to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs. Jesus repeatedly pointed out that the Messiah had come to bring the kingdom of God first to the children of Israel. That's what verse 27 is referencing. But she answered and said to him, Yes, Lord, for even the dogs on the table eat of the children's crumbs. And he said to her, Because of this answer, go thy way, the devil has gone out of thy daughter. And when she went to her house, she found the girl lying upon the bed, and the devil gone. Healing of a deaf mute, and departing again from the district of Tyre, he came by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, through the midst of the district of Decapolis. And they brought to him one deaf and dumb, and entreated him to lay his hand upon him. And taking him aside from the crowd, he put his fingers into the man's ear, and spitting, he touched his tongue, and looking up to heaven, he sighed, and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be thou opened. And his ears were at once opened, and the bound of his tongue was loosed. And he began to speak correctly. And he charged them to tell no one. But the more he charged them, so much the more did they continue to publish it. And so much the more did they wonder, saying, He has done all things well. He has made both the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. Chapter 8. Jesus has compassion on the crowd. In those days, when again there was a great crowd, and they had nothing to eat, he called his disciples together, and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd, for behold, they have now been with me 3 days, and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away to their home fasting, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from a distance. And his disciples answered him, How will anyone be able to satisfy these with bread here in a desert? He asked them, How many loaves have you? And they said, 7. Jesus feeds 4,000. And he bade the crowd recline on the ground. Then taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to distribute. Pardon me. And they set them before the crowd. And they had a few little fishes, and he blessed them, and ordered them to be distributed. And they ate and were satisfied. And they took up what was left of the fragments, 7 baskets. Now those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he dismissed them. The Pharisees asked a sign. And immediately, getting into the boat with his disciples, he came into the district of Dalmanutha. And the Pharisees came forth, and began to dispute with him, demanding from him a sign from heaven to test him. And sighing deeply in spirit, he said, Why does this generation demand a sign? Amen, I say to you, a sign shall not be given to this generation. The sign shall not be given. The Pharisees asked a miraculous sign to confirm Jesus' mission, but he refused because of their obvious insincerity. The leaven of the Pharisees, and he left them, and came back into the boat, crossed the sea. And they had forgotten to bring bread, and they had but 1 loaf with them in the boat. And he began to charge them, saying, Take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. And they began to argue among themselves, saying, We have no bread. But Jesus, knowing this, said, to them, "Why do you argue because you have no bread? Do you not do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still blinded? Though you have eyes, do you not see? And though you have ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves among the 5,000? How many baskets full of fragments did you take up?" They said to him, 12. "And when I broke the 7 loaves among 4,000, how many large baskets of fragments did you take up?" They said, 7. And he said to them, "How is it that you do not yet understand? A blind man at Bethsaida." They came to Bethsaida, and they brought him a blind man, and entreated him to touch him. And taking the blind man by the hand, he led him forth outside the village, and applying spittle to his eyes, he laid his hands upon him, and asked him if he saw anything. And the man looked up and said, "I see men as though they were trees, but walking about." Then again he laid his hands upon the man's eyes, and he began to see, and was restored, so that he saw all things plainly. And he sent him to his house, saying, "Go to thy house, and if thou enter the village, tell nobody." Peter's confession. And Jesus and his disciples went out into the village of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked the disciples, saying to them, "Who do men say that I am?" They answered him, saying, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, and others one of the prophets." Then he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered and said to him, "Thou art the Christ." And he strictly charged them to say nothing about him to anyone. Peter definitely proclaims his faith in Jesus as the Messiah. In a parallel passage, St. Matthew reports him as saying, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Passion and resurrection foretold. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders, and chief priests, and scribes, and be put to death, and after 3 days rise again. And what he said he spoke openly. And Peter, taking him aside, began to chide him. But he, turning and seeing his disciples, rebuked Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for thou dost not mind the things of God, but those of men." The doctrine of the cross. And calling the crowd together with his disciples, he said to them, "If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross and follow me. For he who would save his life will lose it, but he who loses his life for my sake and for the gospel's sake will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world, but suffer the loss of his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will be the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes with the holy angels in the glory of his Father." And he said to them, "Amen, I say to you, there are some of those standing here who will not taste death till they have seen the kingdom of God coming in power." Verse 39, who will not taste death. An example, even in the lifetime of some of his listeners, he will manifest the power of his kingdom. That was chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. Join us next week for 9, 10, 11, and 12 of Mark. Then the week after that, we will be finishing Mark with 13, 14, and 15. So thank you very much for joining us this time. I hope that you all happen to have a wonderful day, and that you all had a wonderful Easter, and God bless.